Well, a very good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone tuning in from around the world for the second in the Water Cities of the Future online discussion. My name is Tom Freyberg. I'm an environmental journalist and content creator specializing in water, and I'll be your host for the next 60 minutes. Now, the title for this session is Reality Bites, Forging Water Resilience when Confronting Climate Adversity. So why cities and why the need for the R word that we keep seeing, resilience, especially when it comes to facing the challenges that are presented by climate change. So by 2050, 7 out of 10 people are expected to live in cities. And as cities continue to grow, so does their exposure to climate and disaster risk. Rapid urbanization is inevitable, and this will bring additional infrastructure challenges, particularly on water. And we've pretty much concreted our way to mega city status around the world. And we're now wrestling with the impact of that and the extremes of water, whether it's too much or too little. So how can we harness water instead of wrestling with it as these increased flows hit our cities and urban centers with increased frequency and intensity? Of course, it's not an overnight fix. It's going to require accelerated innovation, joined up policy, joined up collaboration and investment to really move the needle when it comes to improving water infrastructure at scale. And that's what we're diving into today. We want to explore how water can be seen from a risk through to an opportunity, and really from potential scarcity through to engineering an abundant future. As you would have seen, there's increasing media stories when it comes to cities being hit and hit hard by flooding. However, the stories and cases of cities and urban centers who are being proactive in predicting and managing water supply, they often don't receive the same headlines and attention, but we do have a leading utility of the world to share their story with you today. And we really want to find out more about innovative public-private partnerships, about the use of digital tools, to really how they are being used and harnessed to help with improved infrastructure investments. This is the second in a 3-part discussion series, with part 3 coming out before the end of the year. But also make sure you check out the first session together with Will Sarni. We looked at cities like San Francisco, we looked at Beijing, we looked at Denver, and we looked at the Sponge City initiatives across China. And we even asked our panelists to outline for what they think is the vision of cities of the future, how these would look, how they would function, how people would live. And it's well worth checking out the part 1 of the discussion, which is now available on demand. So a big thanks to our session sponsor, Bentley Systems, for supporting this webinar systems. And now on to today's event. We really want to showcase a positive example, and I'm pleased to say, as I mentioned, a leading utility as a guest to tell their story from Nevada. We want to make sure this is an interactive session. So as you can see on the panel, there is a Q&A function. So please make sure any comments, any thoughts, any stories you may have, don't be shy. Make sure you aren't using that Q&A box. If there's a bit of tumbleweed, I'll make sure to put the pressure on and you guys will put questions in. We want to make sure that this is a kind of a two-way conversation. So halfway through the panel discussion, we'll try and read out as many comments and questions as we can. Before we sort of hear from our guest utility speaker, we're going to hear from someone who certainly needs no introduction. Will Sarni is a practice lead for water and nature at Earth Finance. So Will, over to you.
Tom, good to see you again, as always. Great recap. I think you essentially did set the stage for this conversation, and really excited to really dig in further in terms of what is a water resilient and sustainable city. I really can't emphasize how critical that is right now. It's really not optional. If cities are to thrive and create economic development, business growth, social well-being, and healthy watersheds, we really need to rethink what a sustainable and resilient city is with respect to water. And Tom brought up a really good point. I think it's really, sort of obvious some of the challenges that water stress and water scarcity imposes upon thriving cities. I'm in Denver, and the American West is certainly facing some of the big challenges with respect to the Colorado River Basin, availability of water, which is challenging, if you will, economic development. So cities in the American West are growing. They are, in fact, thriving. And Dave will speak to this a little bit later. But the flip side of that is too much water. And here in the US, we're experiencing the aftermath of Hurricane Helene, which has impacted the southeast portion of the US, and in particular, cities in North Carolina. So as we think about what a sustainable and resilient city is, we really need to be mindful that it's more than scarcity and stress. It is also too much water, and how do we manage that water, not as waste, but as a invaluable resource. Obviously, sustainable and resilient cities need innovation, not just innovation in technology, but innovation in public policy, regulation, and partnerships, which we'll get into a little bit later in terms of what does public and private partnerships look like, and how that innovative trend is really helping cities thrive in a very challenging world. For those of you that know me, I often quote William Gibson, a science fiction author, who says the future's here. It's just not evenly distributed yet. And you will get a glimpse of what that means in our conversation today. The future is in fact here. And some of the examples you will hear from my colleagues and friends will really put a fine point on that. So think about, how do we take these exceptional examples and do a better job in terms of evening it out on a global stage. So with that, I would like to introduce Dave Johnson, Deputy General Manager of Operations, Las Vegas Valley Water District and Southern Nevada Water Authority, a good friend and colleague in tackling wicked water problems. So Dave, over to you.
Will, thanks for having me. And yeah, I've been fortunate enough to collaborate with Will and on many occasions. And again, I appreciate the opportunity to share today a little bit about what's going on with Las Vegas. So I'm going to pull up my presentation. Las Vegas, just to set the stage, has been dealing with pretty extreme drought for the last over 20 years. And so sustainability and looking for solutions has absolutely not been an option. We've had to do that. And I want to give you a little bit of background about Las Vegas and some of the things that we're doing. You can see here, Las Vegas, the Southern Nevada Water Authority is essentially the regional wholesaler for the city of Las Vegas and Henderson, North Las Vegas, and unincorporated Clark County. I'm going to talk a little bit about population in a minute, but you can see 2.3 million annual residents, and we have 41 million annual visitors. So a very significant number of folks coming to spend their time here and hopefully enjoy what we have to offer. I would also highlight that Las Vegas, or Southern Nevada, is essentially 70% of the state's economic engine. So what happens here in Las Vegas is critically important to the state of Nevada as well. So very interesting with respect to that perspective. We also, as you can see, don't get a lot of precipitation here locally. A staggering 4.19 inches of rain per year. And you can see how that stacks up compared to the US. And also some of our other desert friends. We are not blessed with a tremendous amount of precipitation here locally. We do receive our water from the Colorado River, and so we're heavily dependent on Colorado River resources. So just to give you some perspective on population over the years, this is a graphic here of what Las Vegas looked like in 1950. Pretty sparsely populated. As you can remember, it was basically, this was a stop on the trail in the 1800s, and there was an oasis downtown, and that's how Las Vegas was basically started. And then from year to year, you can see this is 1960, and then 1970, and then 1980, and 1990, and 2000, 2010, and 2020. So over the last, I'll say 60 to 70 years, our population has really boomed. Many years we have been the fastest growing city in the United States, and I think we will continue to do that for the foreseeable future. So as I mentioned before, our challenge has been, as population grows, we need to really grab a hold of the water situation that we have, because we have a finite allocation of water from the Colorado River. We can only use so much. So what we've done is we've focused very heavily on what we think are innovative approaches to conservation and demand management here in Southern Nevada. And these results are just a snapshot of what that looks like. So since 2002, our population has increased by 52%. And at the same time, we've driven down our per capita water use by 58% and our overall consumption off the Colorado River by 42%. These are counterintuitive numbers. Many of our partners on the Colorado River and the Desert Southwest area show numbers that are like this. We are very proud of what we've been able to accomplish through all of our efforts to deal basically with climate change. One thing we're also very proud of, and we utilize to a great extent, is what we call our return flow credit methodology. So basically, any drop of water that comes into our system that gets diverted from the Colorado River into our treatment plant can go one of two ways. It can be utilized indoors or outdoors. Indoor use basically goes to showers, sinks, etc., go to the wastewater treatment facility, and then are highly treated, go back to what's called the Las Vegas Wash and back to the Colorado River. So we basically recycle 100% of all of the water that we use indoors. Outdoor use is a different thing, and that's where we spend most of our efforts, is trying to reduce and minimize outdoor use, because that's used one time and we only have the ability to use that, and we call that consumptive use. So you will see all of our conservation measures and all of our adaptation strategies are particularly around outdoor water use. So you see things here in Southern Nevada. Our largest outdoor use is irrigation, the landscapes and trees. Basically anything in Las Vegas that's green, you can bank on the fact that it's irrigated. Our second largest consumptive use is cooling towers. We have used evaporative cooling here in Southern Nevada because it works really well and it's reasonably inexpensive to use. We've used that ever since Las Vegas was founded, and we're finding that may not be the best use of water as we go forward. Also, we have several other consumptive uses that we target. So these are some of the things that we have done, the policies that we've implemented. And this, I would characterize this as a balance of, I'll call it sticks and carrots, incentives, but also regulation. And so we deal with them in these major tranches. Like I mentioned, outdoor irrigation is our largest consumptive use. And grass, basically. So no new grass on golf courses. We put golf courses that exist on water budgets. We're trying to change the turf from a cool season to a warm season. We actually have a new law that we put in place that says that if your grass is non-functional, that you can no longer irrigate it with Colorado River water after 2026. And what non-functional means is that if it's just there for decorative purposes and you can't walk on it, play on it, have a picnic on it, utilize it in a functional way, then it's non-functional. And that's just a few of the grass pieces. We're working very hard on evaporative cooling and converting over new or existing evaporatively cooled structures over to other means. And we put actually a ban on evaporative cooling for new facilities. And we've done quite a bit of things to try to mitigate urban heat island impact also. We're planting trees, working with local not-for-profit organizations to continue to plant trees to help to mitigate those the urban heat island impact. All of those, that's just I'll call it a sampling of our programmatic activities that we've put in place. Some are incentivized, some are regulatory. all in an effort to try to get down to 86 gallons per capita per day. And what that really does for us is that allows us to be able to project a 50-year resource plan that is flush for that 50-year period. So conservation is a part of it, and many other strategies are a part of it as well. But I just wanted to highlight a few of the innovative, I'll call it policy aspects, and of course there's technology aspects baked into those as well. And I just wanted to share to kind of kick off the conversation. So with that, I appreciate the opportunity to give you a little perspective on what Southern Nevada is doing, and I'll look forward to Will coming back.
Thank you, Dave. Really interesting information there. I mean, not only sort of suggesting you've got one of the fastest growing states in terms of population, but at the same time coupling that with reduced water usage. That's quite the story. And also encouraging to hear about the 100% recycling within water indoors as well. So love the phrase, balance of sticks and carrots. You need equal amount of regulation as you do incentives to really help with these new measures. So we're going to dive a bit further into some of that later on. But yeah, thank you, Will Sarni, for joining back on the panel. I'd also like to welcome back Cecília Correia, who is the Senior Water Solutions Manager for Bentley Systems, to join us here on the panel. So hopefully Cecília is joining us here too. Good stuff. So as I mentioned to the audience beforehand, please make sure you enter any questions or comments or stories you may have of where you're tuning in from around the world, particularly in terms of urban water development. But I'd like to maybe kind of throw to you, Cecília, firstly, to maybe kind of reflect on some of the interesting things Dave has said, but also you're a global company and you work with utilities in countries around the world. So where else you're seeing positive examples when it comes to that integration between, water infrastructure as well as future urban planning?
Well, I think one of the things that everyone is looking is to have the more robust water infrastructure. So, and this means, of course, resilience. When it comes to this, I'm not, sure how we can claim cities to be robust, to be honest. Maybe I think what is important is actually to talk about those who are driving efforts to become more water wise or resilient, as I usually like to refer, because if we are wise, it means that we're actually learning from the past. We're learning with our mistakes. And looking at the topic of this webinar, I mean, this is the second one of 3. The first one was talking about the past. This one is talking about the present. And the next one will talk about the future. If we could use just one word, if I could pick one word for each one of them, I would say past siloed, present integrated, and future connected. And what I mean here is that in the past, the many things that we have done in our cities were based on, like, we can dominate nature, right? I implement the solution and I'll be able to solve the problems. In the present, what we are seeing is that we need partnerships, as Will was mentioning before, of course. But there's also the need to create this awareness and create mechanisms of sharing, data between utilities and municipalities. And this is how we're actually going to achieve the future. So it's connected. And I think it's interesting that Will mentioned that, future is already here, because the present is what is building the future. So the part with the connectivity will depend on how well we're doing things on the present. I mean, there's no present without past, and there's no past, without, and there's no future without thinking about the present of today. So when I talk about water-wise and who's doing right, the first thing I would say is that it is a process. And we saw this from David's presentation. I mean, there's not a fixed solution. We don't get to a solution and we say, oh, now we're resilient. It is a process of continuous work. And we have been seeing, I mean, just recently, we have seen a lot of floods in Europe, for example. We've seen in the news in Poland, but also in Germany. And we have seen this also in Africa, in Asia and in the US. We have mentioned this. And we have also seen that the concept, for example, for sponge cities, it's also growing. So even if the city is not 100% as a, considered a sponge city, they're still taking some measures to become more resilient in that aspect. And if I can take, an example of a it's easy to mention big cities, right? Because they have the budget, they have the money, they have the means, right? But for example, in Poland, where they're being hit by these huge floods, the city of Lublin, they are re-engineering their city because of their combined sewer and stormwater system. The goal is, of course, to reduce the overflows, but also to improve the stormwater retention capacity. And they're using different sustainable urban, drainage solutions, like they're having storage areas like the ponds, but they're integrated in this green and blue infrastructure that is actually accommodating for a more integrated way of having things as they would, in fact, exist with a natural infrastructure, to say so. Other examples that may be very obvious. For example, if you think about Singapore, and people can say, "Oh, we know Singapore is very resilient, right?" But if you think, well, they didn't stick to, okay, I have done my work. I am a city of the future. They keep working. Just recently they developed together a new leakage finder tool. And you would say, oh, they're still working on this. And they are, because they want to improve their resilience. They want to improve their non-revenue water. And I am only bringing this example to show that even in an organization who is known for being prepared, advanced, they keep improving and working in ways to increase this, reliability, if we can say so, of their solutions and decisions. And this is resilience. This is what resilience means, is that you never stop. You actually continue to work. This is what cities and resilience is all about. It's a continuous process of improvement.
So for you, defining resilience is this continuous process of evolution. I think you're right. Singapore frequently gets listed as a kind of prime example. I remember a couple of years ago visiting, and the evolution of the water utility, actually, from the water agency to then take on responsibilities for being the coastal agency too, right? Showing that integrated thinking. But yeah, interesting way of phrasing it. So the past siloed, the present integrated, the future connected. But Dave, it seems as if the work you're doing is already kind of integrated, connected. You're part of leading utilities of the world group and actually sharing that information. Can you maybe comment on that, and who else, kind of where you're seeing equal levels of innovation and the need to really share what you've done?
Sure. Yeah, we've been fortunate enough to be one of the initial members of the leading utilities of the world, and many of the innovative approaches that we have come across, both technology and policy, we've been able to share, and we've also been able to gather quite good ideas from many of the other utilities as well that are in that space, because many of the challenges that we face are really not all that different. But I find that if you have I'll call it the will and the ability to implement them, implement solutions, it can make a huge difference. We've shared some of our conservation-related strategies. We've shared, I think, non-revenue water was mentioned before. It's been a tremendous focus in Las Vegas, because every drop of water that leaks through the pipe and we don't get back, that's consumptive use for us. So we've driven our non-revenue water down below 5%, and we're continuing to try to Cecília's point, we're continuing to try to even go further if we possibly can. So techniques on what Singapore PUB and what Mekarod and other international utilities are doing that are part of leading utilities of the world is really helpful, because there may be solutions out there that we haven't found. And so, yeah, tremendously helpful. And we really appreciate and think it's valuable to take the time and energy to be a part of this group.
Well, congratulations on the 5% non-revenue water, which is a pretty remarkable number and achievement of getting there. I want to sort of talk about finance and money. So, Will, we'll throw to you on that. But can you talk about sort of the need? Because you mentioned in your speech, innovation goes beyond technology, right? It goes innovation in policy, innovation in partnerships. But can you talk a little bit about what you're seeing, particularly within the Colorado River Basin, including Nevada, in terms of innovation in funding, financing approaches to really achieve that resilience in the infrastructure?
Sure. I think everyone falls in love with technology, and I'm one of those people, and in particular digital and AI. But I have come to believe that the real impact in addressing the challenges we face are coming from innovation and partnerships. And those innovation and partnerships drive new ways of thinking about funding and financing. And, I'd say I mostly live in the corporate water stewardship world. And really over the past year plus, we've seen, I would say, infinitely better cooperation and engagement between the private sector, multinationals, and utilities in the public sector and NGOs in addressing common challenges. And this is maybe a bit of a long preamble, but for me, this was such a milestone in thinking with respect to corporate water stewardship and how to fund initiatives with utilities. So, yeah, in the Colorado, Dave brought up non-revenue water. The work that we're doing with Water United, which is really driving in much more than collective action. It is truly catalytic in terms of building partnerships in a very unusual way. And if you think about what that means, it translates into new ways of funding digital technologies to solve things like non-revenue water, but also looking at agriculture now and the built environment and so on. So, the notion that a multinational like Microsoft would fund phytotech to work with a utility like Southern Nevada to reduce non-revenue water was really kind of unheard of a few years ago. So for me, when I think about innovation in funding and financing, it's that trio of stakeholders that I find to be really, really interesting and absolutely a game changer. And I hate the term game changer, but I really do believe it was a big deal. And, Dave brought up, now you got me all lit up, Tom. But, Dave's talking, I won't burn up the full amount of time, but, Dave's talking about their work with NGOs. That's a big deal on building healthy watersheds. Also, Dave, I would, call out and kudos to you for working with the private sector like MGM in really understanding that there were some common issues around water and how do we collaborate in very different ways and have an economic relationship, that funding and financing piece, Tom, that really was, not on the table, I would say, a couple years ago. So I get excited about that because it's a new way of thinking about partnerships and a new way of thinking about how to drive change beyond the more traditional models.
And I think it's important to add as well in terms of the ability for scale, because there is the ongoing joke, right, that the water industry has more pilots than a commercial airline in these single projects, but actually the collaboration through multinational startups and then working with multiple utilities across a region like the Colorado, that suddenly has a potential scale that wasn't available beforehand. So let's maybe grab Dave to sort of comment on that, because I remember when you joined us on the Stream podcast, Dave, you said a really amazing comment about sort of having a seat at the table with new businesses coming into the area with which you operate and the ability to sort of look at the forecasting of water demand and actually helping to shape that decision. So I'd love to sort of hear where you see the role of the Southern Nevada Water Authority, as well as kind of new businesses and multinationals and private sector sort of coming in where you've already got sort of water limits.
Absolutely. So one of the things that we realized in our journey is that we did not have a seat at the table associated with the evaluation of businesses that were coming into Southern Nevada. We would get disparate phone calls about, do we have the ability to provide that much water in that particular location, and those types of discussions, but never conversations about, hey, is that actually a good use of the water, the remaining water that we have here in Southern Nevada? And so what we did was we partnered with the Governor's Office of Economic Development and the Las Vegas Global Economic Alliance and developed a tool that could be consistently applied to any entity that wanted to relocate or start up a business here in Southern Nevada, which measures their consumptive water footprint essentially, and gives us a determination of whether or not this is a good water investment for Southern Nevada or not. And really, at a threshold level, what it really did was it allowed us to be able to have a meaningful interaction with these entities, because many of them are coming from locations that are in the Midwest or the East Coast or from some other country even, and they don't really understand the dynamics or how our water system works. And it gave us an opportunity to have, like Will said, a conversation, a collaboration, and a partnership. And we've actually taken some opportunities that we would have originally said, no, this doesn't, on paper, this doesn't really look like it's a good fit. And we've worked with them to kind of look at the way they were doing business, modify the way they were doing business, and be a welcome addition to Southern Nevada, because their consumptive water use was significantly lower just based on understanding. And so we're really excited about that. We've used this tool quite a bit, and it's really helped to inform us. And again, it's something we can apply consistently. So the municipalities within Nevada can all apply this consistently. So it's a partnership. You have to build it together. You have to work together, and you have to work to demonstrate the trust that it takes in order to actually maintain that seat at the table, let's call it.
And it probably helps within that partnership, having a seat at the table in those discussions early on, and then providing the proactive advice, the innovation with the partnerships and the tool. And it's actually within that particular corporation's benefit environmentally, economically, to reduce their water consumption, as opposed to knocking at the door later on in terms of, asking to reduce their water use. So in terms of, you use the word partnership, it's really important that it kind of starts off positively. And that interaction, the development of this tool, is actually pretty innovative in itself. So, Will.
Yeah, I think we should spend a minute on this, because for me, this is more than a partnership. I mean, this is really a two-way conversation on what are the critical issues facing the utility, facing the community, the people, and businesses. And I think, again, that's a big change from what it has been historically, which is either no conversation or a one-way conversation. And this is, it goes to Cecília's point about, integrated and connected in a very, very, very different way. So as we think about, well, where do we go from here? Using that as a model is really how we will deliver on, this promise of sustainable and resilient, thriving, abundant cities. And, I just think we need to talk more about the people piece of the puzzle here, in terms of, getting people to really think differently about what are the common issues and what are the tools that are available for them to, ensure growth, sustainable growth.
Very good. Yeah, I mean, I think when we often talk about integration and connectivity and connection, it's about, can be looked at how different technologies and solutions kind of operate together, that interoperability. But actually, like you said, with the companies and the partnerships, there's a need for equal innovation in that. we will move the discussion on to sort of you mentioned around AI, Will. So, but we will come on to that because a couple of questions have come up in the audience. But before we do, we've got a question for you, Dave, just in terms of this partnerships. A question from Kai Olsen Sawyer, who says, does the SNWA have formal partnerships and working relationships with large water users in the Colorado River Basin, such as agriculture, manufacturing, resorts, recreation, to reduce water consumption and improve resilience? We've partly kind of answered that, I think, in terms of manufacturing and resorts. You mentioned MTM, but maybe, Dave, within that question, you could sort of talk on agriculture, I think.
Well, Southern Nevada is not the largest agricultural community or hub in the United States. In fact, we don't have a lot of agricultural land that we work with. But I would take a moment just to highlight another partnership that was really interesting, and something that I think that could be applied to multiple communities. So Las Vegas is working to rebrand itself as a sports hub as well. So not just casino and gaming entertainment, but entertainment of all kinds. And recently, the Formula One race came to Southern Nevada for the first time. And there's basically a 10-year commitment. And when Formula One decided to come to Southern Nevada, they one of the meetings that we had, the initial meeting, we talked to them about their strong desire to want to be a net zero water consumer for the entire race, which I thought was big thinking. And so what we did was we were very thoughtful that that was a great idea. And so we put together a partnership between MGM, Southern Nevada Water Authority, Formula One, and WaterStart, which is a water innovation group here that started up in Nevada. And we ended up basically being able to apply an atmospheric water generation technology in Southern Nevada, which offset the total consumptive water footprint of the race. And we thought also really set a standard here in Southern Nevada for events that come into Las Vegas. So, you can really accomplish quite a bit with all different types of partnerships. So while we might not have the agricultural example, I wanted to highlight that one because that was kind of a first here for us. And what it did was it also furthered our understanding of that particular technology here in Southern Nevada in a specific application. So that partnership aspect has been very, very valuable, and a little bit of outside the box thinking can really make a difference.
I like that. So you're generating additional water sources and supply, which directly offset what was consumed during the Formula One race. So very cool. So there is a question come up actually, which sort of correlates with one we were going to ask around sort of AI and digital tools. Maybe Cecília, I can throw to you on this to maybe pivot the conversation down digital AI and helping with water resilience. And that is from Eric Linkhart. Thank you, Eric. A question for all of you. In your opinion, how do you think advancements in AI technology will contribute or change water sustainability practices, including resource management and addressing global water scarcity challenges? So, yeah, Cecília, if you want to go first.
Yeah, I mean, that's a big question, how to address water scarcity in the world. But, using the word that Will was saying he doesn't like, I think the digital tools are really the big game changer. We were doing things in a very siloed way. It was because we had access to additional tools that were enabling us to actually look more abroad and thinking about future investments and how to solve some of the problems of the future. Would it make sense today if you invest in something that you haven't tested, that you don't have, what is my risk of doing this or that? So if you want to, not only water scarcity, but if we think also about droughts, if we think about floods, if we think about managing water properly, even if you don't have, too much or too little. In the past, we had no historical data. So we were doing the best we could, like Nusha said in the first webinar, we were doing the best we could with what we had. I mean, but today we have huge amounts of data, but the fact is that we don't know what to do with it. And how can we actually deal with all of this information if we're not using technology? I think that's not even negotiable. And I heard David saying that, it was something that they needed. They needed to go and have some technology to support them, understanding what the data is telling us. So I would say that digital twins and technologies can really break that gap. I mean, to help with analytics, but also some advanced algorithms that will allow us to have insights, about what is happening in our system. How can we actually integrate all of this information and see how one affects the other, and so on? Because it is a cascade effect, right? We know this. I mean, we have been using too much, then we have too less, then we are transforming our watersheds into impervious areas, and then we have problems with that. So it is really a matter of being able to look at all the information and being able to take insights of, what it is doing. So, I mean, I do think that technology will be the biggest supporter for us to understand these aspects and how we can actually learn from one and the others. And I think that's what Will was talking about, partnerships. When you do partnerships, it's because others have faced or have tested some situations.
Very good. So it's not just about accumulating data, but making sure it's data to sort of make informed decisions moving forward as well. So Dave, maybe let's get some insight from you, because you mentioned the kind of the development of that tool from within the utility when it comes to sort of water usage and forward predictions. Elsewhere across the network and your operations, can you talk a bit about sort of how you're seeing the advancements of AI, digital tools for the increased visibility, predictive maintenance, that type of thing?
Absolutely. I think one conversation that's really, really important when you're talking about this whole topic is, and I'll use our example, we generate a tremendous amount of data. So we have AMI, and we have the ability to get readings from every one of our 400,000 service connections on usage, and that's generate multiple readings daily. We have all of our SCADA data. We have a tremendous amount of data. And so what we're learning as we have been working on implementing AI and looking and actually on a journey to put a smart water network in place is that we have to take 3 or 4 steps back and actually make sure that we're managing our data well. Data from various sources, make sure that there is a single source of truth, make sure it's repeatable, and make sure that the quality of that data is AI appropriate. Because just like any other tool, garbage in equals garbage out. And so as we've raced forward to try to deal, and implement some of these solutions that are really advantageous for us, we've had to take a few steps back. And so we're in that process. We've actually stood up a function within our organization, a group that is working on that very initiative, and that is the data management piece. So I wanted to make sure that part of the journey in talking about where we are right now was something that I addressed. We do use a lot of tools that use AI. We are very interested in the smart water network approach that we're developing. And primarily, we've implemented that at the wholesale level through a partnership with Xylem to really take a look at, are we operating the system optimally? Meaning that we have different pumping combinations and configurations, and given the flow and the circumstances, that we are trying to accomplish, are we running the right pumps? Are we maintaining them appropriately? Are we using the data that we have to be able to make the best informed decisions? And so I see this as revolutionary moving forward. I just know that in the continuum of actually making it as effective as it can be, that we have some work to do internally. And I think a lot of utilities are in that space as well, because not only are they dealing with that, but they're also dealing with the cybersecurity aspects to make sure that their data is secure as well. So not to go down that road too far, but yeah, really, really beneficial. Just ramping up and working to try to get to the full function of it.
Great. Thanks for the context, Dave. And as you mentioned, you know, the data that you have has to be AI fit or AI appropriate to really make the most of it to then create those informed decisions. But yeah, there's certainly over the years between different departments that may have been not within Las Vegas, but other utilities perhaps siloed, trying to get access to the data as well. But yeah, good point. Cybersecurity is absolutely paramount. So we have another question from the audience, which I'll come to in a second. But firstly, just on your side, Will, in terms of, you obviously see a lot of innovations across digital technologies. Where do you think things are going to land in terms of coming back to the overall topic of this webinar in driving water resilience within cities? Can you talk a bit about how you're seeing things and some of the solutions as well?
Sure. It's building on Cecília and Dave's comments and perspectives. Look, you know, innovation in public policy and collaboration or partnerships, however you want to phrase it, is in fact not possible now without data and actionable information. It's just not. So I love that Dave talked about a single source of truth. So if you want to work with an unusual suspect, if you will, in terms of new stakeholders, that data and transparency and validation and turning that into information that people can make business decisions on or public policy decisions, it is sort of the Rosetta Stone of all of this that we're talking about. You have to have real-time data, the ability to forecast, and the ability to be transparent with validated data. That is it, as far as, you know, my perspective. And that's a driving force in other parts of the world. I think in Latin America, you know, we're seeing initiatives by Inter-American Development Bank on understanding digital transformation in the water sector and driving education and awareness with utilities in that region. And again, that drives innovation and partnerships with the private sector and NGOs and so on. So, you know, all of this is more than connected. It's essentially coming at the same set of issues with different tools and different thinkings. But, you know, I can't emphasize enough the biggest trend in the world of water is digital, whether it's digital twins, whether it's AI. You know, we didn't talk about workforce enablement in terms of what are the digital tools that address, you know, the fact that we've got an aging workforce in the water utility sector, but also in the private sector. So, yeah, this is, you know, it's all the same thing, essentially.
Very good. So we've had a question come in anonymously from the audience, so we'll try and address that one. And that's, what are you seeing in North America and in other parts of the world? Are city councils and mayors making water a top priority, aka designing for flood resilience? What are the contingency plans for droughts? Maybe who wants to sort of have a stab at that one? Maybe Dave, if you want to kick off, given the kind of I guess the collaboration in the leading utilities group and other sort of states you might be in conversation with. I mean, do you, to sort of summarize the question, is water being prioritized enough?
I think that historically the answer would have been no 20 years ago. And I think today there's been a pretty dramatic shift in thinking, primarily because of need, you know, necessity is the mother of invention, right? And in this particular case, the necessity has grown quite a bit. Whether you're in the desert Southwest and scarcity is an issue, whether you're you're on the Mississippi River and you're finding situations where barges can't even pass because of low river levels, whether you're in the Southeast and you're finding that you have more water than you know what to do with, all the way up into states like Kentucky and Ohio and Indiana as a result of some of these storm events. There are new challenges that are being created as a result of climate change that I think are really opening the eyes of areas that haven't really prioritized that as much as they have in the past. We talk about this aging infrastructure component, and that's kind of like a sleeping giant. But these issues with respect to climate change force that to be front and center. And I think some of these things are actually causing city councils and various I'll call it governing organizations to really think more broadly, because there's an imminent threat that they
I heard this. I think you're right. I mean, how things used to be are perhaps not necessarily how they are today. And I heard this great quote was in New York, the Climate Week at the Rethinking Water event, Columbia University, and someone said it used to be that a mayor or minister would rather publicly announce $1 invested into a new park, into a city where it already has too many parks, rather than water infrastructure, because that's investing into a park would win more votes, right? More support. So, but I think given the increased events from climate change, I think not showing an investment into water infrastructure is not going to be the way forward, particularly with mayors and ministers looking to sort of be in keeping with where in infrastructure investment needs to be.
Hey, Tom, to that point, it'll be really interesting to see what happens in the American Southeast after this recent hurricane. So, city of Asheville,
right,
absolutely devastated. So there is, tragically an opportunity to rethink water and infrastructure and digital. So yeah, I mean, I agree with Dave. I think that, thinking has really changed out of necessity, because if you want economic development, you've got to manage water in a way that is relevant in a world where climate change is, very real.
I agree. Yeah, there's especially given recent events as well. So one of the other topics we wanted to address is sort of how we can improve engagement with civil society when it comes to making long-term investments in water infrastructure. So maybe Will, if you want to kind of give some context on that question, and then we'll come to Dave in terms of within Nevada, in terms of Las Vegas, the importance of engaging, we've talked about with partners, with corporations, but actually with civil society as kind of part of that utility remit. So yeah, Will, if you want to kickstart.
I know you're driving the conversation, but I want to flip this around to you because this is your wheelhouse. But before I do that, look, for me, the biggest lever we can pull is changing public policy. We change public policy to be in alignment, in tune with the realities that we're facing right now. A lot of stuff happens fast. And who changes public policy? It's civil society. It's the voter who is informed and understands in very simple terms why that gallon and liter of water is critical for economic development and business growth. And, I'm going to repeat it again, social well-being and ecosystem health. So how do we take all the geeky language that we are so comfortable with and turn it into something that the layperson truly understands? And, I'll say that Dave's done a great job in doing that in terms of really mobilizing the city and businesses around issues that, for us, we're really comfortable talking about in a silo. But how do you get the layperson to understand that we can have water abundance, but not if we keep up with the status quo? So Tom, this is a question for you. How do you take complicated technical language that we're very comfortable with and make it relevant and actionable to you know, your aunt. I mean, like, you know, whoever. And
That's
I'll
that's
ask
a good
ask-
headline and challenge, right? How can we make our aunties fall in love with water?
And I'm gonna check with your aunt, by the way, to see if you've done a good job with it. But
well, I suspect she's tuned in live right now, so we can probably ask her. No, I'm kidding, but yeah, I mean, I think when it comes down to and the great work that Dave's done at Las Vegas, he can row in afterwards. But I think you have to, when it comes down to water as a service, kind of go beyond the transactional role. I mean, you think historically, when, particularly in the UK, do we hear from our water utilities? And that's when there's a bill, when the bill's overdue, which obviously never happens to me, and you get the red letter through the post, or if there's a hosepipe ban. It's all very transactional as opposed to kind of building that long-term trust, that relationship on things that of interest to you and that particular demographic. So I think, and it's this old analogy, right? Communicating the value of water, but I think you can't do that if it's purely, you know, transactional communication. So there's a lot to it with different demographics and what triggers each of those different kind of groups, and also different platforms to use. So yeah, it's not, again, just like infrastructure. I think turning around the communication that has been quite transactional it takes time, it takes a well thought out strategy, and there are a kind of handful of companies that are getting it right. But yeah, I mean, maybe we should hear from Dave on kind of how Southern Nevada are tackling this in terms of yeah, engaging with civil society as well.
Yeah, we take this pretty seriously because of a few things. One tranche of communication that we really are working hard to do all the time is to ensure people understand simply what day of the week they need to water their lawn with. Our actual usage is directly related to compliance with respect to our watering schedule, which changes throughout the year. We also have a transient population. So you may have educated a group of people, you know, a year ago, and a reasonable percentage of those people may be different this year. So you have to continue to keep on educating that group. We also form our communication strategies based on surveys and analyses that we do. We do polls of citizens to find out, what do you understand? What concerns you? What are the problems? What are the things you really understand? What do you want to hear about? And then we shape our communication approach to make sure that we have those aspects in mind. So if people are concerned about water quality, they start to hear about a new regulation or a new contaminant, how can we get in front of that issue and help them understand that better from a scientific standpoint? And there's certainly art in making sure that you take the scientific and get that into my aunt's abilities to understand, you know, just because they're not in the water space.
Right.
So I would say that, and I would say also another really important thing is, as it relates to, Will mentioned having to do a lot of stuff quickly, make things happen fast, right? Here in Southern Nevada, we've had to make a lot of things happen fast, and things where we had to spend reasonably large amounts of money. And so what we've done is actually put together citizens committees and tried to representative of the hotel gaming industry and the senior community and you know, builders and developers and NGOs. And you know, we may have 15 people on this committee that are representative of different, you know, aspects of the community. And we try to educate them and help them understand what it is that we're trying to do, why we're trying to do it, and then what rate effects may be needed in order to accomplish that. So the capital project, that's $800 million that we need to do. And then, you know, those types of things, help them understand the why behind what we're actually trying to accomplish, and do that in a rapid fashion so that it really is more of a partnership instead of just an edict. So those are a few examples of how we've tried to, you know, get the word out, and how we've tried to collaborate on getting some of these things accomplished.
Super interesting. Thanks, Dave. I think the key thing is getting ahead of the message, building these kind of localized citizen committees. And by the way, if you need someone to help out on the Formula One committee, happy to nominate myself on a trip. But also,
shameless, Tom, shameless.
but also, understanding the why, which is kind of a fundamental part of communication. We are at the top of the hour. I'd just love to quickly get final thoughts from you, Cecília, in terms of engaging with civil society. You've got a really good example from outside of water and from Lisbon and My Street. I think it'd be worth maybe just, if you can, succinctly just kind of
Yes, very
explain
short.
that. if you
I
can,
mean,
yeah.
it has to do with the concept of the future, about being all of us being connected. And I think people and citizens are an important piece of what we need to connect everything. And I was given the example, how do you communicate with young people? You communicate through apps. They have an app for everything. And today, for example, when we go out, right, and there's something happening in a street, the city of Lisbon has an app called My Street. And so you basically, it's geo-reference, of course, and then you indicate that in that street, there's, imagine a tree down, or there's trash or something that they need to go and take care of that, for example. And so, and I'll also tell you that the water utility, they also have a number for people to go and give some indication. And I think in the future, this will be the piece that will connect and will create more awareness, because people will understand that they can play a role on solving some of these problems as well.
So it's a combination between crowdsourcing information from communities, a little bit of citizen science almost coming into it, and that's a way of empowering people to sort of help populate something when it comes to a data source. Super interesting. Amazing.
Yeah.
Thank you, Cecília. So we want to close out this session. We're just gone 5 past the hour. I know we started a little bit late, but thank you once again, Mr. Wilsani, for joining us again, David Johnson from Southern Nevada Water Authority, and Cecília Correia from Bentley Systems. Super interesting conversation. As I mentioned, this is part 2, so we highly recommend, for those of you who enjoyed this, who might not have seen part 1, check out the on-demand link, and also stay tuned for the third part for the end of the year, where we're going to sort of look at other examples and continue the discussion. A big thank you to Bentley Systems for sponsoring the webinar series, and please make sure you forward the link and spread the word on this discussion. So a big thank you to you guys for joining as well.